Hey Gold Creek, we are so excited that you're here with us today. Hey, today I just want to give you a little heads up. In our message today, we're going to be ending with communion. So if you're around your house, look for some elements that you can use, whether it is a piece of bread and some wine, or maybe it's some Triscuits and some Gatorade or whatever else you might have in your house. Grab some of those things so that we can take communion together at the end of the message today. Also, I wanted to share with you guys today this verse that I've been reading in 2 Corinthians, and it says this: you must decide in your heart how much to give, and don't give reluctantly or in response to pressure, for God loves a person who gives cheerfully. And part of why I wanted to read that is because I think about this. We talk about giving a lot. And the reason we do that is because it's actually something that God actually points out is a heart issue. It's not necessarily about, this is for God. It's not actually for God, it's for us. God actually gives us this command because really at the core of things, God doesn't need our money to do what he can do. He's all powerful. He can do everything outside of anything we could ever ask, think, or imagine. But what tithing does and what generosity does for us is it postures our heart in a place where we can say, okay, God, yes, thank you for what you've given me. This is a response for me to say, I want to give this to you as a thanksgiving for what you've done in my life. And I think about this in this time of the year when we're coming into the summer months. Constantly we're surrounded by stories and things that we require to actually give things to other people. We have graduation parties, weddings, happy birthdays that happen over the summer. We've got funerals, all these things where it requires us to actually give a gift to somebody else. And I don't know about you, but in my life, sometimes when I'm buying a gift for somebody, there's sometimes a little bit of a heart hurt in my heart because I know, dang, I need this money to provide for my family or something along those lines, or we try to look at an excuse in that realm. But then when we buy those things and we give them to those people, to see their reaction filled with joy and love because you cared for them, it's such a heartwarming thing in my life. And I think of the same thing when it comes to giving, generosity, and tithing to the Lord. When I give that gift, there's so much heart joy that comes in my life. I start to see that I'm not stressed out about things. I'm not worried about what's coming up in the future because I have this joy that came to my heart being opened and not being hardened because I'm freely giving to the Lord. So I want to encourage you today, if you've never given giving an opportunity or an option in your life, I want to encourage you to take that next step in your life, to say, hey, I want to invest in God's kingdom here. I want to invest in my heart change so I can be one with him. So there's many ways that you can give here. You can give through our app. You can text the number that's on your screen. You can send us even a check in the mail if that's something you prefer. There's just so many ways of giving. All these options are on your screen for you. We would love to invest in the kingdom with you together. So let's continue on with service and hear what Pastor James has to share with us today.
If you're blue and you don't know where to go to, why don't you go where fashion sits?
Who let the dogs out? A little bit of Monica in my life, a little bit of Erica by my side. It's
Hey, welcome everyone. We are in our final week of One Hit Wonders, and this one is a little bit bittersweet for me because I love walking down memory lane. I love looking at what we used to love and thinking about all the stuff and all the memories that came with these songs and the moments in time. And last week we talked about Bad Boys and what did you think of the TV show or the Martin Lawrence movie, and there's just like so many different factors. And today, for our last song, it's probably one of the biggest one-hit wonders of all time. So tell me if you remember this song.
Ice, ice, baby. Alright, stop, collaborate and listen. Ice is back with my brand new invention. Something grabs a hold of me.
Ice, Ice, Baby, right? Do you guys remember that song? I mean, the hook on that was undeniable. Like, everyone knew exactly what was going to happen as soon as the first 5 notes hit. And it was that dun 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 dun. You knew exactly what was going to happen. The synthesizers were going to come in, and then of course you had to stop because you had to collaborate and listen. Everyone knew that. But did you know that there was a huge copyright battle for this song? Massive, because the hook was technically stolen from another very popular band. It wasn't even like they took it from some random indie band that no one has ever heard of. This was a big time, high selling, platinum album rock band that you may have heard of before by the name of Queen. And they recorded a song with another high profile rock band, or rock person I should say, by the name of David Bowie. 2 very big names that came together to record the song Under Pressure, which had the exact same hook line minus 1 extra downbeat, which is what the Vanilla Ice group, I don't know who the entity was that was in charge of this, they were arguing we have a downbeat, it is different, it changes the whole sound and feel of it. But the judge saw right through that. The truth came out. Vanilla Ice's group lied. I don't know if he himself lied, although he was on a lot of interviews saying it's a little different. We have an extra downbeat. You know, he tried to sell it as best he could. But in the end, they actually ended up settling out of court, realizing that they didn't want a long court battle that was just going to drain and drain and drain. And they settled out of court for $4 million, which at the time in the late 90s was a lot of money. And, which is probably the bigger one, Queen and David Bowie wanted songwriting credits. So they got to have all of those. But as I was thinking about this, what if Rob Van Winkle, who his name is Vanilla Ice, his stage name is Vanilla Ice, had just told the truth up front? What if he just said, you know, we actually love this hook, we love the sample, and we wanted to honor them. Rather than hiding what he did, what if he just owned up to the fact that he was a huge fan of those 2 artists and wanted to honor them? Why be so difficult? Would things have turned out differently? Would Queen have said, absolutely, take it, use it, run with it. It's going to give us publicity too. Would they have given them a discount? Would they have given them hardly any trouble at all? We will never know because that is not how they handled it. But today, we're going to look at the idea of dealing with difficult people. Rob Van Winkle's team made it difficult. And we're going to be in the book of 3rd John today. And here's some background on 3rd John before we get started. 3rd John was written about a man named Diotrephes, who's essentially a false prophet in this church. He loves himself. He loves his position. He doesn't want to give it up. And as such, he's giving everyone else a hard time because they were trying to honor Paul and Jesus and grow the church. As such, there is now a division and hurt in the church. And from different readings and different scholars, Diotrephes was probably the church leader, the campus pastor, the senior pastor, the whatever today's equivalent of position is. And these other people that John mentions, Gaius and Demetrius, they're other faithful leaders in the church. So, what does this letter say to us today? What are we trying to pull from today? Well, one is that truth, not everyone should be a leader. And second, the church has people in it that don't necessarily represent Jesus. All that to say, nobody is perfect. No one. None of us, myself included. We all have flaws and problems. And there's 3 myths about church culture that I think a lot of people have when they come in with these expectations. And one of those is that we're all going to get along because we're a church body, we all love Jesus together, we should all get along, that nobody's a hypocrite, and that everyone's got your back. And I think that we come into a lot of situations. This may not just be just a church too. This could be family outings. This could be a work dynamic. Like there's all kinds of expectations that we will place in social and communal situations where we have all or some of these as our forefront, the thing that we want in this relationship. I love my job because we all get along, and I love my job because everyone's upfront and honest and no one's a hypocrite, and I love my job because if I make a mistake, I know they got my back. And then that doesn't always happen, and you go, this company's the worst. Well, maybe the company's not the worst, maybe you're not the worst, and maybe you're just surrounded by imperfect people, you yourself included into that equation. So with that, I want to talk about when we need to be cautious. Because yes, we're surrounded by imperfect people and we are imperfect ourselves. But are there things that we can do to limit, to protect, to create a little more safety so that we lessen the moments where hypocrisy and fakeness and backstabbing really wound us? Maybe it's a grazer, where the knife attack's coming, so you move, and it just kind of grazes you versus a full-on stabbing. I know that was very morbid, but I couldn't think of anything else on the fly, so just run with that one. But when we need to be cautious, the first one is we need to be aware of those who love power but not accountability. So if we read in the scriptures, this is in 3rd John, and the verse says this: I wrote to the church about this, but Diotrephes, who loves to be the leader, refuses to have anything to do with us. So again, you don't have to be in a church-specific setting to grasp this idea. It doesn't have to be in a pastoral context. You don't have to look at me and go, James, is that you? Maybe it is me. Well, a lot of it is me because I'm not perfect as well too. But for me, specifically, I could care less if I have power. That's just not my personality. But you don't have to be in a church setting to grasp this idea. Those that crave power but don't want to be told what to do with their power will eventually lead to hurt and destruction. It's going to happen because there are always going to be people around them that are going to ask questions. They're going to say, are you sure about this? I don't know if this is right. I think you're skating the gray line here a little bit. And that's going to happen. And when that happens, people in power that don't want to give it up, they're going to protect it. Well, Diotrephes was a good leader, at some point at least. When he was a new believer, I have no idea when he became a believer. There's no historical context of like the moment that he signed, I love Jesus. There's nothing like that, so we don't know exactly. But we know that at some point he came to faith in Christ. He became a good leader, which is why they probably put him in charge of this church. But then the power ended up kind of corrupting him a little bit. There's a saying, I'm sure you guys are familiar with this, that absolute power corrupts absolutely. But is that really true? Is that something that is an actual thing, that if you're given power, you will be corrupted? I was reading about it. There was this article that this journalist wrote about two specific lawyers. Fascinating article. The first, this lawyer was almost disbarred on his first court case by the judge because of some of the kind of shady things that he was doing. And he decided that in that moment, he's going to let the court case continue, but the judge recorded for everyone to hear. He says, I'm going to let you continue because we need to figure out what's going to happen with this case, but I want you to know you're warned. And he is quoted as saying, I don't know if you are going to be integritous in your career. Like, he just says all this stuff, and he creates this kind of watch out for this guy persona. Isn't that crazy? I mean, I have serious doubts about whether you have the ethical qualifications to practice law. That's a huge thing for the judge to say about this person, this lawyer, this up-and-comer. The other lawyer was running for Senate. Again, I said a tale of two lawyers. The first one, he was about to be disbarred on his first case. The second one, he's running for Senate. But he withdrew from the election because he was afraid that if he ran, he would split the votes between two good Senate candidates, and the corrupt candidate would win just because he got a majority vote because the other votes were split between these great candidates. Both these lawyers eventually went on to become the President of the United States. Obviously not at the same time, because that's impossible, at different points in our history. The first lawyer, whose ethics were in question, at least early in his career, he won the presidency in the 60s, and you may know him. His name is Richard Nixon. We know from history that he was involved with another ethical conundrum of Watergate, one that actually ended with his resignation from presidency and then a very kind of sketchy pardoning from the next president, who was his VP. The second lawyer, the one that withdrew his candidacy from Senate because he was afraid that a corrupt official would win, he also went on to become president, and you may know him by the name of Abraham Lincoln. And he would oftentimes, and this is also recorded in a lot of historians' books, during his presidency, for 4 hours a day, at least one day a week, he would open his office for citizens, normal citizens, to come in and to share their problems, their grief, all the things that they're struggling and worried about. He would do that every single week because he believed in being transparent and allowing people to access him personally. Two men, two lawyers, two presidents with the same power. Did power corrupt, or did power reveal what was already inside of them? We should be mindful and careful to observe our behavior, our words, and our results. Because the truth is, who you are now is only going to be magnified with more responsibility given. And when Paul is admonishing this man, he's not just pointing at leaders, he's pointing at all of us, because the truth is, you have influence over someone, which by definition means you are leading someone. So you have the exact same possibility of leading this person away from Christ or towards Christ by the way that you speak, by the way that you act, by the way that you are. That's the first one. The second one is be suspicious of people who push personal agendas. If we keep reading the scriptures, in verse 10 it says, when I come, I will report some of the things he is doing and the evil accusations he is making against us. Not only does he refuse to welcome the traveling teachers, he also tells others not to help them. And when they do help, he puts them out of the church. So he kicks them out of the church for helping these missionaries. The Greek word that Paul uses here for accusation is translated to the word gossip. When you think about gossip, you really don't do it to edify or encourage. You don't say, oh, I heard this really juicy piece of gossip. Yeah, this person, oh, they're awesome. Isn't that great? Like, they do so many amazing things. Shh, 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 don't say anything. Okay? Between you and me, they're amazing. You don't say that. When you speak gossip, typically, did you hear about such and such? Oh, man. their Botox makes their face look like a melted snowman. You know, and you make up these things, or you just talk bad about people behind their back. And it could be in a guy setting, you know, like, oh, he bought another Camaro. Oh man, his marriage must be falling apart. No, that has nothing to do with it. Maybe he just likes cars, but we make stuff up because sometimes tearing someone else down makes us feel better. Doesn't make sense, but we still do it. And when Paul says be suspicious of personal agendas, that's a personal agenda that we have when we tear other people down. And we see that the person that Diotrephes is, he gossips. He's not hospitable. He blocks good deeds and he unfairly punishes. All the marks of a terrible leader. Sounds like a great guy, right? Like, oh man, how dare he? Do you guys remember in the movie Home Alone? If you've never seen Home Alone, I'm going to spoil pretty much a big important part of it. So I would pause the video and go watch Home Alone and then come back and be like, okay, I understand this analogy. And then I'm also going to ask you, where have you been since 1990? Just going to throw that out there. But do you remember that he was afraid of Old Man Marley, the guy that would shovel the sidewalks and put salt on the sidewalks? Because as they were out looking out the window, his brother comes over and tells him of a tale of Old Man Marley murdering people and using their cremated ashes, their remains, to salt the sidewalks. And that's why he walks up and down the sidewalks with a shovel and this giant thing of salt. And this actually scares Kevin. And Kevin has a few encounters with him. One is inside of a store, and when he sees him, he screams, the famous Kevin scream, and he runs out. And we know that that wasn't the truth about who Marley really was. And we find out later, after he finds him in a church of all places. Hey, there you go. In a church, there's hypocrites and there's people that are good. Go figure. He sits down with them, he has a conversation, and he finds out that Old Man Marley is a sweet old man who, at the end of the movie, actually saves his life. Isn't it amazing how false news can drive actions? False information, gossip can drive action and fear. Do you remember when we were going to run out of toilet paper? Do you remember that? Do you remember when everyone lost their dadgum minds that we were not going to have toilet paper? As if that was going to be the end of all of us in civilization because we were going to not have these little pillowy pieces of paper to wipe our backsides? What happened? That was a piece of information that absolutely almost destroyed civilization. And I laugh about it now because it's like, it was so ridiculous. I have a good friend, which they weren't a friend at first. They were actually told by a few people that your pastor, your sweet Pastor James, was not a good guy. That I am ego-driven, that I only care about putting myself on top. That's what they were told. That was their information that they received about me. And so that's what she believed about me for years. I mean, not 4 years, F-O, years, for a number of years. And we knew each other for about 5-ish years before we became friends. So I knew her a long time. Like, we knew of each other. Our groups kind of ran in the same circle. We would run into each other every once in a while, not very often. But there was actually a tipping point when we both started attending the same church and serving together. And so we were around each other a lot more often. We would spend more time standing next to each other. We'd spend more time having the chit-chat conversations. Hey, how's it going? How's your week? How's the weather? Oh, it's great. Those kinds of things. And she was able to work alongside of me, but she kept her distance. She kept kind of her personal distance, and she would just watch my behavior and my actions for months. Then one day, she's invited to join our group after church for a meal. Like, a bunch of us were going out to eat, and we're like, hey, you should come with us. And so she's like, cool. And I didn't invite her. It was just someone else in the friend group. And so she accepts, and she sits literally right across the table from me. Doesn't say much. We're doing a lot of the crosstalk, on each side of us. I didn't really think much of it because I didn't know she had an issue with me. I just didn't really know her, and there was other people that I was having conversations with. There's like 12 people at this table. We tried to keep the number 12 because Jesus rolled with 12, so we always made sure that there was 12. And if there was a 13th that was like, hey, can we join your group? I'm like, sorry, man. We are at a holy number. Maybe next time. Get it to us sooner. But there's like 12 of us at the table. And eventually, after, I don't know, like 30 minutes or so, she says to me, this is the weirdest thing. Like, she didn't say anything all night. And she leans up and she says, James? I said, yeah, you're not who I thought you were. thanks, I guess. I mean, I guess it depends on who you thought I was. Like, I didn't know if this is a good thing or if this is a bad thing. So I'm like, thanks, I guess. What do you mean by this? And she says, well, I was told like years ago, years and years and years ago, that you were kind of a troublemaker. I'm like, well, that's true. And you're very selfish. Yeah, that's true. You're kind of destructive. It's still pretty true. But I've been around you closely now, and for about a year. And for the last 6 months, I've really been working next to you because we're serving on the same serve teams. And I haven't really seen any of that behavior. And I just kind of stopped and I was like, okay, well, let me just tell you, I'm not perfect. So those things that you mentioned, those are true-ish to a degree. Are they my number one behaviors? No. But I'm imperfect, so I'm going to have moments of ego and selfishness and destructiveness. Everyone does. And she's like, no, I understand that. But I just didn't see it on the scale that everyone said, that you were just this terrible person, that no one should be friends with you. And I said, well, who's your source? Like, where'd you get this information? And she's like, oh, I don't really want to throw someone else under the bus. I'm like, fair. You don't have to say who it is. But I said, so for the last 5-ish years that I've known you, that was your belief about me. And it wasn't until about 6 months ago, or actually now, that you see a different person. And she said, yeah. And I said, well, that's a bummer for us, I guess, because we were denied a friendship because of your view of me. And we ended up becoming really good friends after that. We actually spent a lot of time together. Her husband was a good friend of mine. Like we became really close until obviously life kind of goes in different directions and we moved away and things drifted. But I think about that, and you can absolutely become what you believe. What you hear can be what you believe. That's what I meant to say. I said that out, totally awkward. What you hear can be what you believe. And it may not be true, but it doesn't matter. That's what you heard, so that's what you believe. This is what she believed about me, that I was this terrible person. And that just wasn't true. But on the flip side, you can absolutely walk into every situation, every community opportunity, every friendship opportunity, every job opportunity with your eyes open, looking for the real person, the real behavior, the real patterns of behavior, not just listening to the gossip that you might hear. I feel like Jesus would have done that. Let's keep going. Third, keep focus on the right examples. The first two are things we shouldn't do. This one, let's keep focusing on the right examples by examining the fruit of their lives. What do I mean by this? Let's come around in a second. Verse 11. Dear friends, don't let this bad example influence you. I feel like I just preached that in the last point. Follow only what is good. Remember that those who do good prove that they are God's children, and those who do evil prove that they do not know God. That's what I mean by examining the fruit of their lives. There's many examples in the Bible where they say they will know your faith by your love. They will know your faith by your actions. They will know what you believe by the fruit that you produce. Meaning, if you are an apple tree, you will produce apples. If you are a Christian, you will produce Christ-like behaviors. I love that John doesn't end on the negative. Diotrephes, you're not a great dude, but I'm not going to end there. I'm going to end on the positives. There are people in the church that are doing the right things. They are ministering to people. They're spreading the gospel. They are saying Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and people are finding Christ because of it. They're imperfect still, but they do what they do, following those that are chasing after God, and they are building this momentum. That's amazing. And it's hard to do. Gaius, Demetrius, they were probably struggling following the leadership, but it didn't change their view of God. They said, you know what? We're still going to spread the gospel. My friend, her reversal of opinion happened because for 6 months, she watched my behavior and words. She watched as church leadership kept putting more and more on my plate. She watched as I stepped, and this is totally random, but I stepped in on the worship team because they were short male singers for like a period of like 3 months. And they just didn't have any male singers. And I didn't really want to do this, even though I started my career in worship. I really didn't want to. It wasn't my thing. I was like, you know what? For me personally, this just isn't my ministry button. But they needed help. And they said, James, we know you can do this, so we need you to come up. So I was like, dadgummit. And I jumped up. And she was like a little apprehensive because she was on the worship team. She's like, I don't let this hoser on the worship team next to me. And then she was like, he's actually kind of a nice guy. I'm like, I know, isn't that great? But all that observation, she finally spoke. You don't seem like I thought you would be. I told her, again, I'm not perfect. I've done all of these other things. Who hasn't? But if a person sees bad once and lets that be who that person is, I can't control that. Luckily, I'm forgiven by Jesus, but I can't control how others view me off of one set of circumstances. I might have been having a bad day. She might have seen me walk by a snail on the ground and be like, stupid snail, and I flicked it. I don't know. I've never done that. But, if she did or someone else did, that's obviously a weird behavior. But that's not who I am. The reality is we will all see the worst behaviors the more we get to know people. That's just the truth. The closer you get to people, you're going to see some bad behavior. You're going to see it more often. Because again, we all have bad weeks, months, years. The question is, will you let that become who they are? And would you want the same done to you? The key takeaway that I want to give you today is don't let a few bad people ruin your experience with God and the church. Church hurt is real. I am not downplaying any of that. I have been hurt by the church too, and I'm a pastor. And I know that God is bigger than the church. And I know that no matter what I think is the right course or set of behaviors, that God doesn't change, that He is above all of that. That no matter what happens, He is still at the top of it going, don't worry, I'm going to lead you through this. He will use everything and everyone, the good and the bad, to reach people's hearts. And our responsibility, my responsibility, your responsibility is to be as attractive and loving as we can. Just like John's encouragement to Gaius. And that's how I wanted to end, is with scripture. They have told the church, hear of your loving friendship. Please continue providing for such teachers in a manner that pleases God. Gaius was told not to. He's going to get kicked out of the church. It didn't stop him from ministering to people the way that Jesus asked him to do. He is modeling an example of faith. And when we make mistakes and we own up, and when someone else makes this mistake and we forgive them, that's Christianity. That's Jesus' love right there. And I love that He gives us those examples to follow. And again, I'm not diminishing any pain that you've felt in the past, any church hurt, any church Christians that have said mean things to you. I'm not saying that those aren't terrible things. I am just saying that they are imperfect as well too. And of course they're going to do and say imperfect things, but that doesn't change that a perfect God still loves you and that He values you and He wants to be in connection with you. And so my encouragement to you is follow God, not people. Now what I want to do is I want to end today with communion, and I would love for you guys to grab some elements if you can, and just kind of pause the video, and that'd be fine too. But we're going to do it because I think that Jesus had this great moment with His closest friends. Like they're all up there. He knew that one would betray Him, and that the other 11 would desert Him. Did He cancel communion because of that? No. He still served them. That just blows my mind. He goes to that upper room knowing what's going to happen, that Judas is going to betray him, and the other 11 are going to run away, that Peter, it was his closest friend, was going to deny that he knew him 3 times. He knew all of this, and He still served them, still washed their feet, still had communion with them. So today, as we take communion, I want you to think about Jesus serving those that hurt Him. He forgave them. And we have the choice to do the same. So let's take communion together. What I'd like for you to do right now is grab your bread and remember that this represents His body, that He broke the bread, handed it to His disciples. And He is painting a picture here of what forgiveness really is, because He is going to let His body be broken and His blood be shed so that you and I can experience forgiveness. So take and eat. This represents His body, which was given as a sacrifice for us. The natural consequences of your body breaking is that your blood will spill. And so He took a cup filled with wine, a normal thing to do during Passover. But again, another symbolic reference that His blood was going to be the final sanctification. Big word, big Christian word, but what it means is that we are free. And that was going to be the final thing, the final reason why we were going to be connected to God forever, was because His blood covers us and God now sees holy. So take and drink. This is His blood. that he willfully gave for us. Let me pray for you. Heavenly Father, I'm so grateful for today. I just ask right now that you continue to just provide. God, I know that there are many people watching that have experienced pain and hurt, and I pray that that does not become a deterrent for them following you, for them investing into relationships, and for them finding a church, because we are all imperfect. I pray that they find the right place. God, I pray that they find the right spot. I pray, God, that through all of this, they do not let go of you and let go of your robe. And I just pray right now in this moment for healing if people that are watching, they just need healing, for excitement for those that need to invest in a church family, and God, for perseverance for those that are just kind of in the middle of the doldrums. They're just not sure what's next. I just pray for a spark and ignition of passion. And I ask for this, God, in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you guys again for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you guys next week for a new series. I'm not going to tell you what it is. You're just going to have to tune in to find out.